Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Two Sons Podcast. Yes, we are here. We are here tonight. We are here. We are star bright. It is me, your host, and it is me, Mo Fam, my brother across the screen, to the right of the screen, to the left of the screen, all over the screen. Our wonderful co-host, Philip. Yes, say hello to the ladies and gentlemen, Philip.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen, and non-gender specified people.
Yes, because we do have many different listeners here on Two Sons Podcast. Hello, everyone. Hope you are all doing well. We are back with another beautiful, wonderful episode for you guys. Nothing about recent movies. I did an episode on that last week, so go check it out. We're doing pretty well on that. Go check out the other couple episodes we've done on Tales of the Empire as well. That was a very riveting episode and very exciting to hear. If you guys haven't seen that show, definitely check it out. Oh, my screen's shaking. Excuse me. Apologies if the Wi-Fi is bad this episode. My Wi-Fi has kind of been pretty crappy lately, so excuse us. But with that being said, today we have a very exciting episode for you guys. We are going to be talking about one of the most talked topics in sci-fi movies, sci-fi history, and continues to dominate, continues to surprise us, continues to be wonderfully primal. Yes, the trilogy itself, the new movie itself, the 9 total movies, I believe, at this point. We are going to be talking about Planet of the Apes. However, we are going to be specifically talking about Andy Serkis's beautiful, beautiful creation, Rise, Dawn, and War. And my brother will give you a little bit of information on Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, non-spoilers, because I have not seen it myself. But this has been a hot and butt topic I've seen all over TikTok, Instagram, all my social medias, and I just wanted to talk about it. I told my brother, hey, let's do an episode on Planet of the Apes. And you know what he said? What a wonderful day. It's a wonderful day to do
I
this.
did.
So,
I did say
even
that.
though it's 8:20 at night,
I
but
did.
it's
I did
still a
say that.
wonderful day. All right, guys. Once again, I'm in my little podcasting closet here. I promise I want to get this decorated. What I should put here, I don't know. I did hang something here, but I guess you can't see it unless I tilt the camera up, which has no sense because then you won't see my face, and I'm sure you guys want to see that. But with that being said, why don't we get into how we're doing, and then we'll roll with it. That's when
So is this
that's when
part
you
where
say
I
how
start
you
talking,
do.
or are you talking?
Yeah, that's
Okay. Is
I'm
me?
kind of
It's my
talking.
turn.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Okay.
yeah,
Sorry. I
yeah.
just wasn't too sure. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I go now, right?
What?
Okay. 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 Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going, right. Is my turn?
Yeah.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
going.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Hello.
Sorry. I was waiting for a response, and then you froze at that like unopportune time, and I was
I
like,
already told you the
"Does he know what
Wi-Fi
I'm saying?"
sucks. Yes, you are going.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, I'm doing pretty okay. Kind of the same old. Not really too much going on. There's been a few things going on really. Thankfully, both me and my brother's grandfather is doing really well post surgery. He recently went to the hospital for some further back surgery. Just to kind of help alleviate some of the pain and everything. So thankfully, he's doing pretty well. He did very well on that, and then he had to actually go into another surgery while he was in the hospital for some spinal fluid. So thankfully, he also is doing really well with that. I just saw him today. He looks fantastic. He's doing really good. So hopefully, fingers crossed, he'll be home in a couple of days, which will be nice. So that is definitely something to look forward to. Um, Other than that, there's really not too much going on. Kind of taking care of the house in my grandpa's absence. Making sure me and my grandma are okay. And in between that, I've been going to work, making that money, paying the bills, how it is. And then when I'm not working, I'm at home, probably sleeping or curled up in my bed because I just don't have energy to do anything else. So
Fair enough.
I've been. It's funny because like I feel like I've been lazy, but like I haven't been lazy. It's just that where you have so much going on that you're just exhausted, and when you finally have free time to yourself, you're just like, well, I want to be productive and maybe like go shopping or do this or do that, but it's like nope, I'm just going to stay in bed because I have no energy and I don't know what to do. So I've been very much that mentality, but hopefully when things get a little bit back to normal, it'll start to give me a little bit more energy that I need. But other than that, can't really complain. Doing pretty good. Just kind of taking one day at a time, per usual. And yeah, just finally excited to get back to another wonderful episode of Two Sons Podcast. And I'm excited to talk about today's episode because we really haven't talked about Planet of the Apes on the podcast yet. And it is a hot topic in the pop cult community. So I think it'll be a fun discussion. So I think we'll have a lot of fun things to talk about. But yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
Wonderful. Again, what a wonderful day it is. Who would have thunk we could have squeezed that into this episode already several times? And I'm going to continue to do it throughout this episode because it is a wonderful episode. I'm so good. We're so good at our jobs that I don't know how we have not been invited to a movie premiere. I mean, I'm known around Long Island for my ape impression. Like I personally I can't do it on screen for you guys because like I physically don't have enough room. Like that's the wall right there. Like that's it's too close. And like you need maneuvering room, right? But like I've been called the ape of Long Island. Like when I'm in public, sometimes people are like, you know, like just simple. But with that being said, I'm doing okay.
Mm.
I'm still a little tired as always. I had a scare in the middle of a night with something falling off the wall and making a very large noise, and it scared me. And I didn't want to get up and check it out. But it's fine. It's just something that broke, unfortunately, that fell off the wall. I'm gonna try to fix it later or tomorrow or whatever. But thank God it was okay. So happy about that. Once again, thank God for our grandfather's surgery. Unfortunately, he had to get another one right after the other one, but he was already in the hospital, so it worked out. Yeah. And he's recovering now, so he's chilling. What else? I'm gonna be getting a new job soon, so I'm very happy. My brother knows that it's something I've been trying very hard to do lately, and I finally got an opportunity. Thank you. Yes, round of applause. I finally got a good opportunity, and I enjoyed the interview, and I enjoyed the boss, and I thought it would be an interesting position to take. So it's something that I'm gonna try. Don't know when I'm starting. Maybe after I come back from my vacation, but very excited nonetheless. So, again, still going to be doing this for you guys and everything. But very excited about that. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Sorry for that interruption. I've had my recent tattoos, pretty much fully heal. My where are you? Where are you? There you are. My triceratops is chilling, and Kong is fully done, fully healed. Godzilla needs to be finished, but that'll come later when more money comes. Um, Other than that, everything else is going pretty well. I've been looking online. I've had a little more money in my pocket lately, so I've been looking online to try to decorate this spot. Once again, guys, if you have any ideas what I should put, if I should put a movie poster, like just one poster, if I should put a couple little things, I was thinking about putting a couple little cool pieces of art and maybe a couple like cool pieces of movie stuff. But I'm not exactly sure yet because again, it's not a big space to work with. I mean, I might be able to like I can't really push my computer back anymore. So that's the best you're gonna get unless I, lean back. But we're not here to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think me and my brother are both pretty excited to talk about this episode because I feel like before this movie came out, this trilogy, the most recent trilogy we're gonna talk about, really was an underrated trilogy in sci-fi, or just in general. When a lot of people talk about, favorite movie trilogies, it's always, Batman, Lord of the Rings, I don't even know what other trilogy, Star Wars, stuff like that, like, big names. And, this was always kind of under the radar. What is going? Do you see that on your screen? Hello? Is my
I
camera
do. I do.
out for you
You're
too?
freaking out.
Oh God! Oh
Yeah,
Jesus Christ!
your camera's
All
freaking
right, this
out.
is weird. This was happening earlier. I'm not sure why when I logged on. All right, let's ignore it. Hopefully, it goes away. Alrighty then.
Okay, it stopped.
Sorry guys. I did the Wi-Fi, the connection. I don't know if something happened with my camera. I'm trying to get a better setup for you guys anyway. So apologies for the interruptions and weirdness. But we don't do things normal. Oh, there it is again. All right. Well, we'll just add it as effects. This is special effects that we're currently working on. Yeah, yeah. All right. We'll put a warning in the
Yeah,
description.
it's almost like we're in like a post-apocalyptic like a Planet of the Apes world, and like we're like kind of stuttering with technology, and like we don't have the best technology. So kind of immerse yourself in like a post-apocalyptic
Exactly,
Earth, and like
exactly.
technology is very limited, and the signal is not as strong as it once used to be.
Yeah,
So
this
me and
is the
Joey are
sign that it looks
communicating
like I'm
from
not
two
making it in
states,
the
trying
apocalypse.
to survive. Uh, you know, yeah. So just
Well, alrighty then. With that being said, let's get into our trilogy talk, shall we? All right. Before
hmm
we
hmm
start, just want to
hmm
give you a couple of
hmm
little fun facts about Planet of the Apes, a little overview. So, in total, the
Well,
whole.
actually, I have a fun fact to share real quick.
Okay, well, why don't you go for it then?
We actually talked about Planet of the Apes briefly um, on the podcast before when we did like our best trilogies of like all time. I remember we did mention Planet of the Apes. I don't remember where it exactly ranked. I think it was like maybe top three for both of us. It might have been top one to be honest,
Really?
for both of us. But I do remember we briefly talked about it. We didn't really go into too much detail, but we did mention Planet of the Apes before. So now we're doing a whole episode on it.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, I remember we did that trilogy episode, but we didn't like fully go in depth because there are so many trilogies out there and we didn't know how to rank it. Maybe we'll do like an updated episode, at one point because definitely my opinions might have changed, his opinions might have changed and everything. God, I'm so sorry about the cat. I genuinely don't know what's going on. Um Let me see if I can fix that. Let's see, can I turn it? Okay, I'm gonna turn it off for a sec. So sorry if you don't see my screen. I'm just kind of hoping that it fixes itself if I turn it back on. All right, we're reconnecting. But we'll continue going as we fix these technical difficulties. Um, but yeah, my little fun fact is Planet of the Apes has been around since the 60s, I believe. What the first film was made in like 62, 68, 65, something like that. And it's been going. It went strong from like the 60s to the 80s, and then it stopped for a little bit, and then came back in early 2000s with Mark Wahlberg, and Tim Burton directed that movie, and it bombed. I believe it was like 2001, and then it finally came back in 2011 with Rise of the Planet of the Apes with Andy Serkis behind with his mocap company, and then it spurred probably one of the most underrated trilogies of all time. I'm gonna turn my camera back on, see if that makes a difference. Looks like it's not. All right. Wow, that made it worse. Wow, wow. Geez. Okay. Um. And then I lost my train of thought because we're talking about this. Um. But well, okay, I'm gonna turn the camera off for a second again. But in total, the trilogy has made the trilogy.
Hold on. I'm sorry.
Jesus,
Your
I don't.
audio is
My
very
audio says
very
it's
choppy.
fine
Like
on
you kind of
here. I
sound
don't
like a
know if it's the
robot, to be
Wi-Fi.
honest.
I don't know what's going on with my recording. But how's audio now? Audio all right? I started. Everybody, why don't you talk for a little bit while I try to get this situated?
No, you sound worse, to be honest. Okay. Yeah, I'll pick up where he left off. Apologies for the technical difficulties. I mean, we do this on the spot, so stuff like this happens. Um, so as he was starting to say, obviously, Planet of the Apes is a very well-known sci-fi trilogy. The original Planet of the Apes movie came out in the 1960s. I don't have an exact date. I could probably look it up real quick. When exactly the first movie came up. Let me see. Planet of the Apes. So it looks like the first movie came out in 1968. It was simply called Planet of the Apes. It was filmed and directed by Franklin J. Schaffner. Let's see. It was a smash success with both critics and audiences, earning rave reviews and taking an estimated 22 million, nearly four times its budget. So for a budget of 8 million, so basically since the beginning of the Planet of the Apes trilogy, these movies have been breaking the box office basically, and yes, so the original trilogy started in 1968. Now, a lot of people get confused a little bit with the timeline because there have been a lot of movies and little like shows and little side projects that have been done over time that have really expanded upon the Planet of the Apes universe and whatnot. So, if memory serves me correctly, I believe there were three Planet of the Apes movies that made up the first trilogy. And then I think between the first trilogy and the 2001 film by Tim Burton, starring Mark Wahlberg, there were also two other films after that that tied into the original trilogy. So I think you had the three original trilogy movies. I had like two sequel movies that focused on the original Caesar and like the Rise of the Planet of the Apes or the Battle of the Planet of the Apes. And then obviously, you had a probably rough period of a couple of decades. Then in 2001, obviously Tim Burton released Planet of the Apes with Mark Wahlberg as a way to like reboot the franchise. It got terrible reviews. Obviously, I haven't watched it personally, but I haven't heard the greatest things about it. People complain from everywhere, like the costumes to the makeup to the practical effects. There was just a certain charm and nostalgia that the original Planet of the Apes trilogy brought when it came to their practical effects and their makeup that wasn't reciprocated with this 2001 film. So I think that's where it lost a lot of traction, to be honest. And if anything, like I said, it was more of a reboot of the very first movie. So this is basically like a rerun or a redo of the 1968 film. This didn't continue the timeline or didn't continue the story. It was simply just like, hey, we're going to reboot this franchise in the 21st century, and we're going to release. I'm sorry, did you say anything? It's still really bad. No, it's really bad. I wonder if you'll have maybe more luck. Maybe if there's a way you could leave the call and then maybe rejoin. Okay, so while he's doing that, I'll continue. Again, apologies for the delay, but these things happen. So yeah, so the 2001 film was originally set up as a way to basically reboot the franchise, following the 1968 original film, and there wasn't really too many projects in that little span. From 2001, you kind of had a more of a dry spell for like over a decade or so, and then that is when you got Andy Serkis's Planet of the Apes trilogy. Um, that's when you got Andy Serkis's Planet of the Apes trilogy. Started with obviously Rise of the Planet of the Apes, then going to Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and then finally, Battle or War for the Planet of the Apes. Excuse me, War for the Planet of the Apes, um, which ended that trilogy. And then obviously we just had recently this year in 2024, we had Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes that is going to be a direct sequel trilogy to the Andy Serkis trilogy and continue the story of Caesar and his followers and the whole simian flu and that world over 300 years later. So, like you said, we'll touch a little bit upon, what that movie entailed, how I liked it, what it had in it. Um, but we won't go too much into it because obviously my brother hasn't seen it yet, and obviously don't want to spoil anything for you guys for those that have not had the opportunity to go see it yet. So before we continue on, I'm going to check in with my brother. How you doing over there, Joey? Are you okay? So I could hear you, but then the way your audio comes through on my end, it just sounds all staticky. Because to be honest, whatever you're trying to say right now, I have no idea what you're saying. Sorry, apologies, everybody. Like I said, this stuff happens, so bear with us as we try to figure this out. Yeah, that's correct. I don't think anything is working for you either. Um, like I said, you're in the call, and I can see your box lighting up, but your camera is all messed up, and your audio is just extremely staticky and choppy. And if I could hear it, there's a chance that our audience might hear it as well. I know it usually like fixes like all the interruptions and stuff like post recording. But if I'm hearing it on my end, then that might be the way it's coming through the recording. I'm not sure though. We won't know until obviously we finish the episode. Type. Okay, perfect. Okay, so while Joey continues to fix his little communications and his error, I'm going to continue the episode. So, like I said, we're just going to briefly go over the history of the Planet of the Apes one more time, and then we're going to start talking a little bit about the Andy Serkis movie. So, I apologize for repeating myself or for basically stating all this information once again. But to kill the time, since we have the opportunity, basically what I'm going to do is that I'm going to give me 1 second. Let me look up Planet of the Apes. Let's get a real in-depth picture of Planet of the Apes and whatnot. So give me 1 second here. Okay, cool. So, briefly, just kind of going over. Let's see. Is there a way I could share my screen on this? Maybe. If I could go here. Okay, perfect. Okay, I haven't actually shared my screen on this before. So I think you guys could basically see what I'm seeing. So if you guys are seeing what I'm seeing, we're gonna go through this a little bit together. Like I said, just give Joey some time until he is able to basically fix his technical issues and whatnot. So let's hope that he could do that in no time. So obviously right here, this is just a basic Wikipedia page about Planet of the Apes. Its history, how it's done film wise. So we're gonna go through it a little bit and just kind of go over like some of the movies and just how the franchise started. And oh, look at that! A guest has appeared. A wild Joey has appeared in the corner. Hello, Joey. Yeah. Okay. Well, your camera looks a lot better, and your audio came in nice and clear. So far. I just knocked on my table, just to you know hope that continues. Okay, cool. So yeah, so since you're joining us just now, I was about to go over basically where the foundations and the beginnings of the Planet of the Apes franchise came from, and just kind of going over like all the movies that have came out and just how long this franchise has been around. So obviously, if you could see the screen here, can you see the screen here that I'm on? Okay, perfect. Okay. So obviously we see that well before even the original films, the Planet of the Apes was actually based on a novel. So the series began with a French author, Pierre Boulle, 1963's novel La Planète des Singes, which I assume translates to Planet of the Apes, obviously in French. I never took French, so I don't, you know, I don't plan to be a fluent speaker, but so the franchise itself originally started from the idea of a novel, obviously again written in 1963 by a French author titled "The Planet of the Apes." So basically, again, the novel is all about somebody that voyages to a distant planet. Obviously, you have these primitive, speechless humans, and they're obviously enslaved by an advanced society of apes. So obviously, it breaks down the different, categorizations of them there. So from the very beginning, gorillas were seen as more like police officers, and soldiers. The chimpanzees were more of like the normal, positions and classes in society, and then the orangutans were the politicians because they were seen as the smartest. So obviously, right there, we can see exactly where the films got their ideas from. So then we fast forward about 5 years to 1968, to the first film called simply The Planet of the Apes. So just a brief look right here. So obviously, it was directed by Franklin J. Schaffner. We see that the budget for this movie was about $5.81 million. And we looked up before, I think while you were gone, that it took in an estimated $22 million, nearly four times its budget. So we see from the very beginning of the franchise's history that the first Planet of the Apes movie did extremely well for itself. So it paid back its budget 4 times over. We also see that John Chambers received an honorary Oscar at the 41st Academic Awards for his makeup effects. Again, if any of you have seen the original ape designs for Planet of the Apes, they're just one in a kind. They're very classic. Um, Jerry Goldsmith's score and Morton Hack's costume design also earned Oscar nominations. So we see that during the 40 why can't I say it? 41st Academy Awards, we see that they took home an award for the makeup effects. And they were also nominated for the score of the movie, which I heard is absolutely brilliant, as well as the costume design. And I'm sure they'll probably show pictures eventually. But if you haven't seen any of the original costume designs, I highly recommend looking them up because they are, they look very simple, but they're also very well done for their time, especially. Obviously, 2 years later, we have a sequel in the mix called Beneath the Planet of the Apes. This came out in 1970. Um, so let's see. We see that Paul Dean wrote the script for this movie. So the original guy from the first film, his name was Charlie Heston, right? This is this guy right here. He was basically the main star of the film. So to make a long story short, he was part of a astronaut crew that thought they were going to a new planet, and it turns out that they traveled basically a couple hundred years into the future, and technically they never left Earth. And he finds out by the end of the film that they never left Earth, and they were just in a version of Earth where over the next 100 years, obviously apes became smarter and were ruling Earth, and then humans digressed back to their primitive forms. So basically, the film stars around him, and then there's like this really infamous scene at the end of the first film where he's on a beach and he finds the Statue of Liberty because he's in like basically a wasteland, New York, and he's like, "Oh my god!" He's like, "We never left Earth," because he had this like huge realization where he's like, "Oh my god, this is weird. What is the Statue of Liberty doing here? What?" And then like he's like, "Oh my god, no, this is Earth," and then I don't really do it justice, but it's a really good scene. So just if you have the chance, like just look it up and watch it for yourself. Um, so we see him reprise his role again as the main character in Beneath the Planet of the Apes. To make a long story short, for this film, basically what happens is that Charlie Heschner, as the main character, finds this underground civilization of humans that are actually mutants. From post-nuclear radiation, their skin is a little deformed. They basically became like telepathic and psychic, and they have these mind powers. They end up worshiping this giant nuclear bomb as a deity. It gets a little strange. Um, so basically the whole premise of the movie is him discovering this like advanced society of humans under the earth, and basically the apes preparing for war because I guess they find out about this nuclear bomb and these advanced humans, and they're like, oh, we must eradicate all the humans. So they eventually amass a force, and then towards the end of the film they end up assaulting like this little base that the humans are holed up in, and Charlie Heschner actually dies. And in his dying moments, he actually launches the nuke. So you assume that like he kind of just blows up that part of the world, and everything just is like that was. Fun fact, that was really the only way that he was going to leave this franchise because he was like, well, I don't want to come back for a third one. So he's like, if you're going to put me in this movie, then you're going to kill me. So they basically had him die and then launch the nuke. Yeah, that's basically the premise of the second one. Not really. I mean, it kind of says it in the name, like Beneath the Planet of the Apes. I mean, underground. So there's really not much to dissect there. But let's see. Unfortunately, unlike its predecessor, though, we find that Beneath the Planet of the Apes was poorly reviewed. They actually regard it as one of the worst of the Ape sequels, other than the final one, which is Battle for the Planet of the Apes, that came out in 1973. However, it was a major box office hit, nearing the original's numbers. So again, it made about 22 million. And again, 22 million, but they only had a $3.4 million budget. I mean, that is so. Not only did it make its budget back, but it made more than the original. I mean, the original made like 4 times its budget, The sequel made what, quick math, like that's almost like 7 times, 7, 8 times its budget. So that's really good. Surprised, besides the bad reviews of the box office. Going down here, we have Escape for the Planet of the Apes. So basically, to make a long story short, when it comes to this film, after the nuclear apocalypse, stay with me here because this is where it starts to get a little confusing, right? So we see in the first movie, they went like over like 300 years in the future. Like I think they're in like the time like 2300 or something, right? The second movie, they're still in the same time period, right? But then they set up the nuclear bomb. So then naturally there's a nuclear explosion. So, if I'm understanding correctly, there were 3 survivors of the nuclear explosion. There was Cornelius, and Cornelia, and then a third ape. I don't remember the third ape's name, but there was Cornelius and Cornelia. Those two are the most important, so remember those names. The film opens up with them returning to Earth, right? In the spacecraft that Charlie Heschner arrived on the first Planet of the Apes movie on. Okay, so they were able to somehow fix it, reverse engineer it, and they brought it back to, I don't know if it's going to say. I don't think it's going to say, but it basically brought them back to their original time. So let's say like this took place in like the 1970s, right? So it took them back to the 1970s, and aboard the vessel, all of a sudden they take off their helmets, and everybody's like, "Oh my god! Like apes! Like what is going on?" Because like they just assume it's the astronauts, and then they take off their helmets and like, "What's going on?" And basically the whole premise of the film is that like these apes are both questioned, obviously, by the U.S. government. They are not necessarily experimented on, but like they are questioned by the government. They want to know exactly where they come from. There's a famous scene where they're in a courthouse, basically explaining like their society and civilization, what it once was. And towards the end of the film, we actually, I think, see the death of both Cornelius and Cornelia. There's a famous scene towards the end of the film where there's this like mad scientist that is like super evil and wants to like run experiments on them and just kind of like use them as guinea pigs. And he's after Cornelia, and Cornelia like fakes, like she's basically like holding a baby, and the doctor thinks it's the baby. So there's like, this really like fucked up scene where like she gets like pushed to the ground, and the doctor just like unloads a chamber like on this like poor baby. But you find out that there's no baby in there because like she like switched the babies. Um, because to make a long story short, both her and Cornelius give birth to somebody that we might know, Caesar. And in this original Planet of the Apes trilogy, this is where Caesar comes from the birth of these two apes. And I think that's how the film ends. Unfortunately, I think it kind of just ends with all of them dying. Unfortunately, but Caesar lives. Um, and I don't know. Let's see how this one did. Mhm. Well, Cornelia was the name of the ape that eventually becomes his wife, and then he has the 2 sons with. And fun fact, they named their youngest son Cornelius in honor of the original apes from the original trilogy. So yeah, fun fact. Yeah, I actually found out that that's exactly why they named that ape Cornelia and Cornelius, because they were paying homage to the original apes. So let's see how this one did. We see that it opened on May 21st, 1971. Less than a year after Beneath. So these two movies came out pretty recently after one another. It was well received by the critics, which is great. And This is the turning point where basically the point critics began seeing the films less as an independent unit and more as an installment of a greater work. So basically, I assume that this time, like the movie critics thought that these were just like generic one-off movies about like just smart apes. And then when this movie came out, they were like, "Oh shit, we might have the works of a possible franchise here." So it's interesting to see that they finally recognized it, like the third movie in, which is interesting. I'm not seeing anything about how much it made. Oh, we see that it gave Fox gave it a budget of 2.5 million. Now, do we see how much it made? Yeah, I don't see anything. Yeah, I'm gonna assume that it was. Yeah, I'm gonna assume that obviously it did very well enough. We see that it performed well at the box office, but not as strongly as its predecessors. So we could assume that it made its money back, but it didn't make its money back like exponentially. But it was popular enough where they demanded another movie. So this is where we get into 1972, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. So what's interesting about these movies, keep in mind, is that Fox as a studio was requesting these movies, and every single movie, the budget got lower. So you go from Escape of the Planet of the Apes at what, like 2.5 million for its budget. Then this one has only a budget of 1.7 million. Imagine like having that budget for 1.7 million. Yeah, seriously. So basically, in this movie, it gives us a nice little synopsis here. We see that following Escape, obviously Conquest is set in the near future. So I think when it means near future, this is like maybe the 1990s. It's set in the near future where humans have turned apes into slaves. So from what I understand, from Escape to Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, there was this disease that basically killed off all household pets. So it killed off like all the dogs and all the cats, right? Very interesting to just kind of make that the story point. Because basically what they were saying is that because this disease killed off all your typical household pets, that the next best thing that they could turn to is like they're like, huh, well, why don't we just use the apes as household pets and servants and things to experiment on? And that's basically how you get the setup for Conquest. So basically, by the beginning of the film, it's a total reverse of the first film back in 1968, where the humans are in power and they're the smarter species, and the apes are enslaved and in captivity, and Caesar is the only one that is smart, and all the other ones are not because they're just normal apes, pretty much. Um, so we see that obviously Caesar, again, we all know who Caesar is, we know and love him. He rises from bondage to lead an ape rebellion, obviously very similarly mirroring Rise of the Planet of the Apes that will be seen a couple of decades later, right? Um, so we see that the film opened up on June 30th, 1972. So reviews were mixed, but the ending left the series open to another sequel, and Conquest was successfully enough at the box office that Fox commissioned another film. So again, we don't know exactly how much it made in the box office, but we know it was successful enough to warrant another movie. Fun fact about this movie too, because keep in mind, how I get, I fall in love with a franchise. I watch 1,000,001 YouTube videos on the history and a deep dive and analysis. Fun fact about this movie: they filmed an original ending of this movie where Caesar was very different from the Caesar that we see in the Andy Serkis trilogy. We see that he was more militaristic. He was more willing to bring the fight to the humans and almost like down with humanity. There's a very famous scene at the end of this film where he basically gives like a rousing speech to just basically a group of apes. And he's basically just like, yeah, now we have our freedom, like down with the humans. And then, funny enough, I guess like maybe the critics or like people at like Fox Studio were like, huh, yeah, I don't really like that. Can you make him like a little bit nicer? And then apparently they changed the ending where if you look at the actor himself, if you look at Caesar, he's still mouthing the words of the original ending, but there's a voiced over audio of the actor himself saying something totally different. Basically saying that like, oh, like, yes, we escaped and we're free, but we should learn to live with the humans and we don't need violence and all that stuff. And because this movie came out when it did, I wonder if maybe Vietnam or maybe Korea possibly maybe influenced the tone of this movie, and maybe they were all about like world peace and like make love, like not war. So maybe they were like, why don't we tone this down a little bit? But they didn't have enough in the budget to like actually go and like film another ending. So it's literally the same ending. So the audio doesn't match up with his lips. So he's just sitting there like talking like, yeah, like down with humans, and then like the audio is like, guys, we should all be friends. So it's very misleading. Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah. Right there is a great example of the makeup right there. A little thing right there. So finally, we have the last installment in the original Planet of the Apes franchise, which was Battle for the Planet of the Apes. Again, came out in 1973, and again had another smaller budget of $1.2 million. So they really just snubbed them an extra $500,000 just for the hell of it. I mean, I don't know. What's amazing? I I just love how Fox was like, you know what? We love these films. We want you to make more. It's making us money, but we're going to give you less money every time. So good luck. And then the studio was just like, piece of cake. And then they just kept putting out movie after movie. Um, so again, $1.2 million budget, the lowest of the series. And the filmmakers went into this project knowing that it would be the end of the series. So Lee Thompson returned as the director. Um, Let's see. Anything? So, according to what this is saying, Battle for the Planet of the Apes continued conquest focus on a racial conflict and domination, but likely based in part of the studio's wishes. The Corringtons discarded Den's pessimistic treatment in favor of a story with a more hopeful, though ambiguous, resolution. So this kind of goes upon like what we were just talking about with the whole conquest of the Planet of the Apes. Basically, this movie was basically setting up for this like really like sad, like disheartening, like this is the end of the world. Like the apes are going to rise up and like take over the world order, and the humans are going to go extinct or they're going to become primitive. And then the studio was like, yeah, but I don't really like that ending. They kind of pull like the old anime, like, I don't know. Yeah. So they basically ended up going with the revamped version of like, oh well, maybe we could live side by side, ape and human alike, but they kept it ambiguous. To not exactly basically, it seems like it left off where they didn't actually tell you what happened, so you don't know if there's going to be like a happy ending or whatever. Very similarly, I mean, we'll talk about this more when you finally see it, but very similarly to how Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes left off. So there's a lot of homage and a lot of Easter eggs being shown in this movie from the original franchises, which is really interesting. Um, so yeah, let's see. So obviously, going into a little bit more detail, Battle follows Caesar as he leads the apes and their human subjects after a devastating war that destroyed much of the planet. He contends with both an attack by radiation-scarred human mutants and a coup attempt as he attempts to build a better society for both apes and humans. Um, uh, McDowell returned as Caesar, and Severin Darden returned as Culp. Interesting. I wonder if Culp is like the precursor for Koba. Yeah, we see that Paul Williams, who is also a famous actor, he played the orangutan Virgil, he played like a really famous orangutan doctor in like the first couple of movies. Very well known. Uh, and it opened on May 2nd, 1973. It made a profit over production costs, but received poor reviews, who regarded it as the weakest of the five films. So we see Battle of the Planet of the Apes considered the weakest of the five films, but then we also see that Beneath the Planet of the Apes is the worst sequel out of the franchise. Um, so again, it seems like this film leaves us very ambiguous wise. I would compare it to Andy Serkis's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I think it probably has a very similar ending where they're trying to navigate this like very tense piece between humans. And again, notice how it said in the description that Caesar is leading apes and enslaved humans. So in this rendition of Caesar, he not only killed humans, but he also enslaved them too. So yeah, obviously the apes are all for slavery, so they are pro slavery. But yeah, but that basically and then just to kind of look at a brief synopsis right here at the very bottom. So critics have offered various interpretations of the film's messages and its significance for the series. Particular attention has been paid to the ambiguous imagery in the ending. Set over 700 years after the main events, the last scene depicts a statue of Caesar shedding a single tear as the lawgiver recounts Caesar's story to an integrated audience of ape and human children. By one interpretation, the statue cries tears of joy because the species have broken the cycle of oppression, giving the series an optimistic finale. By another, the statue weeps because racial strife still exists, implying the dystopian future of Planet and Beneath is unavoidable. And I don't know about you, but reading that actually just gave me chills a little bit because I feel like there's a very strong message there that is probably looked over. You know, because basically what these films were trying to prove well before their time is that humanity basically never had to compete with another species that was like as intelligent and capable as we were. There was a very short time where Homo sapiens lived alongside Neanderthals for a couple of million years. But even then, we saw that, when the Ice Age approached and, resources and food were getting scarce, we saw that the Neanderthals died out. Now, obviously, there's just multiple theories saying that the Neanderthals weren't as advanced as Homo sapiens, so they didn't have good hunting and gathering techniques, so maybe that's probably why they died out. There was also the mixture of them breeding with Homo sapiens, because there are some people, if they check their ancestry today, they actually have some Neanderthal DNA in them, which is actually pretty interesting. Um, However, because the Planet of the Apes offers this different approach, there's this new theory saying that the extinction of the Neanderthals could have been possibly the first human genocide in history. And there's a very strong case that the Homo sapiens could have saw the Neanderthals as competition and wiped them out. And unfortunately, we don't really have any evidence or anything to prove that. But we're seeing in these films that we now have humans who are Homo sapiens going up against a more intelligent and capable ape-like species that are rivaling Homo sapiens for hegemony over planet Earth. And we see that the last time that ever happened, one side survived and one didn't. So that raises a bunch of questions on what actually happened to the Neanderthals. Did they just naturally go extinct? Was that the first ever case of human genocide, like in history? So it really just begs the question, especially towards the end of this film, where it could have went both ways. And I think the imagery of Caesar with the tear is really poetic because then you could look at it from both sides of the same coin. So it definitely gave that perspective that I guess the studio was looking for, where they're like, hey, you could always either interpret it this way or that way. So yes, Joey. And what's interesting is that, oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah. No, no, sorry, go ahead. Sorry. Mhm. Yeah, I forgot what the gorilla's name is, but it's a different gorilla. Um, but yeah, I remember when we were on the phone the other day, and like I said his no in the car. I was like, damn. I was like, that is probably the most perfect I'm gonna get it to his no like I'm ever gonna get. Like, I mean, I would do it now, but I would like absolutely destroy my voice. It would probably scare the shit out of me. It would. It, I could just picture like me just doing it now and just like scaring the shit out of grandma. But what's pretty interesting, yeah. Well, this is actually like a good point that you bring up because this is actually another thing that I actually learned. If this was to actually happen in real life, right, and like there was some sort of like drug or medicine that happened to make apes and primates more intelligent, like we see in Planet of the Apes, they actually would never develop the ability to speak because according to their anatomy, they don't have the correct vocal cords or vocal usage to actually form words. So this was something that they entirely added to the movie. So this is not actually. Yes, they are known for sign language, so they would be able to probably create their whole a whole new like um sign language alphabet, like just for themselves, and they would be probably entirely fluent, and they would definitely communicate through sign language. I mean, I could definitely see that. I put money on that, but they actually don't have the physical vocal capabilities to actually speak, which I actually found pretty interesting because I didn't know that until I watched the YouTube videos. I just assumed that yeah, I mean, it makes sense that humans and primates were pretty much alike, so maybe they could actually speak if they were more intelligent. But no, I found out that their anatomy, that's what makes them, that's one of the things that makes them different. They just don't have the vocal capacity. I mean, obviously they have the vocal capacity to make sounds and grunt and whatever, but they don't have the actual ability to like, I guess, do the vibrations or the rhythms like off the vocal cords and actually develop words or whatever. Um, so before we move on to some of the other medias, I just wanted to cover again. This was one of the biggest sci-fi franchises that was out for their time in the 1960s and the 1970s, and it actually ruled the hearts of people all across the world, and especially in the United States, for decades. And honestly, one of the biggest hits to Planet of the Apes as a franchise that not necessarily uh, sidetracked it, but possibly sidelined it a little bit, was a franchise that people will know and love to this very day. And can you take a guess at what that is? Yep, yep. When Star Wars came out originally, I think it actually came. I think the first Star Wars came out around. Yeah. So with Star Wars coming out in the 1970s, that was when sci-fi was extremely at its peak. And again, it didn't necessarily sideline Planet of the Apes, but it gave it some competition in the box office, in the cinema world itself. I just thought that was a little cool Easter egg to learn. Because again, it's just one of the other franchises that we know and love, obviously. So just to kind of go over, I mean, we're not going to spend too much time on it, but I just want to go over some of the other media adaptations. So to make a long story short, there was a small little Planet of the Apes TV series that they tried to do. The story is not really worth remembering. It didn't really do that well, to be honest. It only, I think, lasted maybe like a dozen or so episodes, and then it was canceled. There was a Planet of the Apes animated series that came out in 1975 that basically kind of followed the premise of the live action one, that didn't really do too well and was eventually canceled as well. Um, so we see here that we're getting to some of the remake films, and before we go into the next part of this episode, which is going to be about the Andy Serkis trilogy, we're briefly just going to cover Planet of the Apes, which obviously came out in 2001. So this was directed by Tim Burton, and obviously it starred Mark Wahlberg. Obviously based on the 1963 novel of Planet of the Apes themselves. So we see that Tim Burton wanted to do a reimagining of Planet of the Apes. This was kind of their way of rebooting the franchise after a couple of decades. The studio budgeted the film at about $100 million. And we see, let's see, we see Mark Wahlberg renown his role as astronaut Leo Davison. This was not the name of the character that was played by Charles in the first Planet of the Apes movie, but it's the very same premise. There's about an astronaut. He travels through a wormhole to a distant planet where apes enslave humans. Obviously he leads a human revolt and upends ape civilization by discovering that the apes evolved from the normal Earth primates who has. So this one goes a little bit in a different direction where they don't necessarily travel to Earth in the future. They travel through a wormhole to another planet. And basically, he leads a human revolt and upends ape civilization by discovering that the apes evolved from the normal Earth primates who have accompanied his mission and had arrived on the planet years before. So I guess during his mission in space, they brought some primates on, and this is another reason why this movie didn't do so well, because just trying to read like a description of this movie, it doesn't really make any sense. Like, how did he get to this wormhole planet, but then also bring the apes that colonized this planet and then became smarter, then enslaved the humans, and then how did he lead a revolt against the apes that he brought himself? And it's just and then there was this weird sexual chemistry between him and one of the apes, and it was that I don't know. Um, let's see. Moving on. So we see that the film received mixed reviews, and then obviously most critics believed it failed to compare to the original, which I entirely agree. Obviously, much of the negative commentary focused on the confusing plot and twist ending. Though many reviewers praised the special effects, it took in 362 million worldwide, so it did make back its money, but maybe only like triple what it did. Fox had initially hoped for a sequel, but obviously the difficult production left Burton unenthusiastic about participating, which obviously did not lead to a sequel. So basically, after Burton saw how terrible this movie did, and with critics, he was like, "Nope, I don't want to do this anymore." And the twist ending that they're talking about is something similar that happened in Battle for the Planet of the Apes, where apparently Mark Wahlberg returns to Earth and then he goes to the Lincoln Memorial statue, and instead of President Lincoln, it's an ape. And then he's like, "What? Like, what the heck?" And then that's how it ends. So the fact that he leads a revolt against the apes and then you assume he wins, but then he goes home and he loses, so yeah, I mean, we just don't really talk about this movie, to be honest. I mean, they're just there are just some of those franchises where like you just kind of turn a blind eye and you're like, yeah, just don't look at this one. This one doesn't count. Um, but yeah, I mean, that is basically. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen because we don't really need to see anything else for the Andy Circus ones. I could always just go back to the tab for some information. Um, but yeah, this is basically a little summary. Well, a little summary. It was a summary basically of the Planet of the Apes franchise. So we saw that they were successful with a 5 movie franchise. Running from 1968 to what I think 1972-73. And we saw that although the budgets for these movies kept going down year by year, that they kept making their money back, and Fox kept wanting more. And they captured the hearts and minds of audiences alike, and they did really well for themselves. And obviously, they expanded it with their marketing and making TV appearances, merchandise here and there. We see that they tried to branch out into other media, such as TV animation, and then also a live action TV series. Although they weren't that successful, it did show that the franchise had the capability of trying something like that and expanding beyond the movie screen. And then we see it kind of fade a little bit into obscurity, not necessarily obscurity, but just out of the limelight. There's been a lot more sci-fi projects and other movies that kind of took the mantle over the years, and Planet of the Apes was beloved and cherished, but it wasn't really at the forefront of everybody's mind. And then obviously we see again in 2001 that they tried to reboot it, absolutely failed. We don't talk about that one. And Planet of the Apes kind of hit a real bad hiccup, to be honest, because they were like, well, are they ever going to make another one? With the failure of 2001, obviously, what was the future of the Planet of the Apes? Was there going to be a future for these apes? Were we ever going to see these talking monkeys on the screen again? And while I go take care of something for 1 second, my lovely brother will basically explain to us that yes, there was light at the end of the tunnel, and yes, they did make a whole nother trilogy. So while he does that, excuse me for 1 second while I go check on something. Yes. I was getting her a rice pudding. he played Snoke. Mhm. 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 Wow. Yeah, 24. Seriously. I have a fun fact. The first movie, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, was the most CGI movie of the entire trilogy. Because after that, both Dawn and War for the Planet of the Apes were a mixture of CGI and obviously practical effects. I mean, most of the CGI in those movies probably stemmed from like the big battle sequences and then most likely like their faces just to get like the correct facial expressions and everything. But again, like you said, with the fact that they had to go to like ape school and like ape training, like most of the swinging and the visual effects and like the stunts and whatever, like are all practical. Like those are not CGI. Also, it just goes to show that studios nowadays are just lazy when it comes to CGI, and that's why you see such a decrease in the quality of CGI. And like you see like these movies in like the mid 2000s, and you're like, wow, this shit was awesome. Whatever happened to CGI? And you realize that because it's all about money making, and these companies want to cut corners, and they don't care about CGI anymore. And they're like, we're gonna make our movies look stupid as shit, and people are still gonna pay a ton of money to go see it. Because again, you take any movie like Transformers, Planet of the Apes, like Pirates of the Caribbean, you take all of that and like you compare it to like the most recent CGI you saw in like the latest Marvel film, and the mid 2000 projects are exactly. And like this is at a time where like these studios were like, what do you mean budget? What budget? I don't know what you're talking about budget. And they were just like, yeah, let's do it. Like yeah, like fuck it, let's go. Let's see what we can do with CGI. Because it was so new that like people didn't really know where the limit was. They were just like, we're gonna do as best as we can with this. And we're gonna take advantage of this. Mhm. And what's interesting is that, like, you could tell that, like, obviously, like, in this day and age that, like, you look at that first film and you're like, "Yeah, I could definitely see that they were dabbling with CGI," because you could tell that it definitely is more heavily CGI. Yeah. However, like, it still holds up, like, to this day, like, where you watch it and you're like, "They were so creative, like, with what they did with this technology." Like, it was they really turned it into, like, a work of art, to be honest. And I mean, obviously Rise is usually considered like the like last movie when people rank like their trilogies. But don't let the ranking fool you. I mean, this is one of the more important, if not like the most important trilogy out of the whole entire trilogy. I guess like just not to say the word trilogy like 5,000 times, but yeah, I mean this is the most important movie out of this story because again, I mean this is where you get the origin of the virus. Again, like you said, this was somebody that was just trying to find a cure for Alzheimer's, right? Trying to do a noble thing. But we see the hypocrisy in that. yeah, we see the hypocrisy in that because we see that they were trying to do something noble for a cause, right? Like cure this disease that ails millions of elderly people to this day, but they were experimenting on animals. So it's like where's where's the middle ground? Where's the gray area? It's like you can't say you're doing one thing for a noble cause and then also testing and prodding and poking on thousands of chimpanzees, kidnapping them from Africa and their natural environments, and then using them as test subjects. And again, I mean, especially yeah, he did. I think he died because he had like the electric taser in his hand, and I think Caesar sprayed him with water while he was trying to electrocute one of them, and he basically electrocuted himself to death. But what's interesting is that this also sows the seeds for both Caesar and Kobo's worldview on how they view humans and just the world. Because again, you see Caesar being raised by humans. He's learned to love, and he sees the good side of humanity and all their good traits that we all have in today's age. Like this is not just movie magic. Like the good traits that you see in the film by humanity are good traits that we have in real life. However, you see on that same coin, you flip it to the other side, and you have someone like Koba who is seeing nothing but the worst. I found out again, fun fact, Easter egg knowledge, that before Koba was actually sent to this facility to be experimented on, he was actually part of a traveling circus where he was forced to do tricks by his owner. And I think he upset his owner, or he made his owner mad one day, and his owner is responsible for his eye, and that's why he has like the cloudy, milky eye in the movie. So and the good thing about the 21st century is that there were a lot of comic books actually and little short stories that were based off of Planet of the Apes. So if you ever read those, they actually give you some deep dive analysis of the characters and their origins, like apes and humans alike. I actually want to pick some up because I'm actually just curious to see. But that's where you could find out that information. I think it's actually from a book where they talk about Koba and like where he came from. Um, but we see that he's only seen the bad side of humanity. He was tortured and abused by his previous owner, and then his owner sent him to this facility, and he was poked and prodded, and he was put under excruciating circumstances as a test subject. And he saw nothing but the malice and the greed and the corruption of humanity and all those bad qualities that we have in ourselves today in this modern age. So we see two totally different. This is not gray. This is black and white. We're seeing two totally different sides, and you could argue that obviously these two don't come bud to head in the first film. I mean, I think the most interaction they have during the film is when Caesar basically nods to Koba, allowing him to like push the helicopter off the Golden State Bridge to kill, yeah, to kill that that multi-millionaire guy. I forgot what. Yeah, basically. But that's it. But it's interesting to see that you see those seeds already sown um that early. Mhm. Yeah, I mean that's kind of how they. Well, I don't know if they necessarily meet like the two of them, but that's how they introduce her at least. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I would give it probably like a solid 8 out of 10. I think there's a lot of poetic justice in this film, where, like you said, there's a lot of cliches, a lot of symbolisms. You see, um, I mean, one of the biggest examples, that you see is that you see that was a lovely close up of Joey's face as he stood up. You see, the innocence of the world and like a childlike naivety through Caesar as he's growing up, coming from the hands of man's greed and selfishness. I mean, you're seeing that Caesar is growing up in a loving and caring environment, being raised by humans, and he has a very naive outlook of the world because he's only seeing the best in people, the good in people. But what he doesn't realize is that basically from the very beginning, from like his mother to his birth to his situation as whole, is all coming from greed, is all coming from a way for humans to fight diseases, try to play God a little bit, and there's just some sort of something poetic there about Caesar's naivety being clouded by a charade of malicious things. Um, and again, Planet of the Apes is just very poetic with everything they do. There's symbolism and there's meanings behind every single one of the characters, every single one of the storylines, and it's just that classic trope of like, what if humans decide to play God? I mean, again, curing diseases is not necessarily playing God, but trying to cure diseases or like maybe improve or upgrade medicine comes with its risks, because we don't know everything, right? So we can only act or perform based on what we know. And in this case, we see that they are trying to cure Alzheimer's. Great. I mean, that is a great thing to want to cure. But we see that they're naive in the sense that they're experimenting on living beings, and obviously we see what effect that has. And I mean, not only um, does it affect them by obviously making the apes and the primates a lot smarter than them, but because they had to make a stronger variant and they had to use viruses as a way to keep this drug in the body for longer and not have the body make any antibodies for it. They ended up killing 90% of the population because this thing spread like a virus and killed billions of people. So, again, obviously, I wouldn't say the first movie is lackluster at all. I mean, it's not lacklusting, if anything. But it's an origin film. So not every origin film like hits it out of the park. I mean, it could be a great movie, but it's not like the best thing since sliced bread. But with that being said, I mean, solid 8 out of 10. There's a lot of symbolism, poetic justice. There's a lot of early on character development for everybody. I think Will and Caesar relationship is beautiful. I mean, we see that heavily impact him in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes as well. And that basically just kind of impacts Caesar's whole character, as his relationship with Will is basically how he views humanity and how that relationship and that mindset with humanity changes from Rise to War of the Planet of the Apes, which is hands down one of the best character arcs of any fictional character in cinema. Um, so yeah, I mean it's a great start to the trilogy, and they had nothing but success to build upon. And it started out very similarly to the original Planet of the Apes franchise. Yeah, yeah. No, I mean I was pretty much finished up there. Anyway. sequel. I think it's been like 5 or 6 years, maybe. They say it like very early in the film. Like Maurice comments on how it's been like he says like a specific number, like it's been like so and so winters since we've seen any humans. So they tell you really early on. I don't think it's been a decade. I think it's been maybe like 5 or 6 years. Fun fact: Caesar's first son, Blue Eyes, is named after his mother. Yeah, because Caesar's mother. Yeah, I think Caesar's mother was called Blue Eyes, and she had because a lot of people were like, "Oh, well, if the simian flu is supposed to give them like green eyes, like how does Blue Eyes have blue eyes?" It's like, um, there's still a thing called genetics, and I mean, if his grandmother had blue eyes, it's totally possible for him to also have blue eyes with maybe a hint of green. so, so yeah, but I thought that was a pretty fun fact there because I thought about it the other day and I was like, oh my god, it's so obvious. I was like, how do people not realize this? That I mean, genetics would probably work the same exact way in apes that they would humans. I was like, if his grandmother had blue eyes, there's a chance that he might have blue eyes also. So yeah, well, no, his wife survives this movie. They all survived this movie, to be honest. It's not until War of the Planet of the Apes where his eldest son and wife die. Yeah, no, she's suffering from some sort of sickness, but the humans that were good to Caesar heal her with like antibiotics, and she survives. No, his oldest son survives this movie, and then in War of the Planet of the Apes, when um, Woody Harrelson and his squad infiltrate their like village, that's when Caesar's wife and his oldest son die because he thinks that he thinks that Blue Eyes is Caesar, and he shoots him like on sight, and then he realizes that oh shit. Mm. I was about to say, can we just talk about Coppola from the top ropes? Just like just this is like one of the scenes that like just maybe like Koba because like just no thought in his head. He was just like, "Yep, I'm gonna leap from this giant hill and then just like see if I can hit this bear." And he just it's so cool. His name was Carver. I just happen to know these because I just watched like a couple of videos pretty recently, so they just kind of stuck in my mind. Yeah, fun fact. I mean, a lot of people wonder what happened to Will, and his girlfriend and stuff like after the first film, and like it's not really ever explained. But then, a little Easter egg. If you look closely, when they find Will's old house, in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, there is a insignia that is like spray painted or posted on his doorway, which basically is the symbol for that there is an infected person inside. Please do not like go inside or leave, which basically proves that Will and most likely his girlfriend unfortunately succumbed to the simian flu, and that's how they died. Yeah, because his car was still there and it was like all overgrown. So yeah, it shows that he like never left. So mhm. Yeah, and unfortunately, he dies. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest takeaways from this film, obviously being the middle installment of the trilogy, is that there's two main things you got to focus on. I mean, obviously the humans are important in this story. They're not as important, as they are in, I would say, the third film, because again, it's only been a couple of years since the simian flu outbreak, so we still see that humanity is trying to hold on to what they once had, because to them it seems like it was pretty recent. They're like, we have a chance to get like electricity, to get things back to the way they could be. Like we could do this. Um, so you see that they're fighting for a noble cause, but then you also have seen how propaganda over the last few years has made every human be like, yeah, this is all the apes' fault. They're the ones that released this virus, when none of them know that this was actually human made and humans were the reasons for their own downfall, like they always are. But what else is new? They just want to blame it on somebody else. Um, but besides that, the two biggest things to focus on is you have Caesar's character development, which is an essential part of this movie, and then you also have his relationship with Koba, and then obviously we talked about like their two viewpoints on humanity from the first film, but we see that further progress in this film, and then obviously come into conflict between the two of them, which obviously leads to the third and final act, with the death of Koba. Um, we see how Caesar's naivety and his upbringing from humanity has allowed him to have a more softer and positive view of humanity, and is why he is so willing to help out these humans and get the dam working, and to have them possibly live side by side. And the only reason why he's like this is because he never had to face any hardships or any torment from humans besides Draco Malfoy in the first one. But I mean, a couple of weeks of that doesn't compare to a lifetime. So for him that wasn't enough to break his thoughts about humanity. And we see that his naivety on humanity is his biggest downfall in this film, which leads to his eventual shooting, and him basically being on the brink of death. Because at the end of the day, Caesar did make mistakes. I mean, he wasn't entirely innocent. I mean, again, going over, watching videos, both Koba and Caesar had their moments where they were both correct, but they didn't necessarily do what they were supposed to. Like for example, when they let the humans first go, like I mean, Koba, tells them to, follow them and whatever. Um, but when Koba discovers like all the guns and the ammunition, like in the storehouse, like he should have directly said that to Caesar. Like we could have had a totally different outcome if he went back to Caesar and was like, "Look, me and my men just saw this whole warehouse where they have all these guns and weapons that they're preparing." That might have made Caesar think a little differently. But before they even had a chance to say anything, Koba like got extremely frustrated and was like, "Oh, Caesar loves humans more than apes," and then that's what has them fight, in the dam for that brief moment. So, again, you see his naivety cloud his judgment, which ultimately leads to him getting shot. And then obviously towards the end of the film, you realize that he was not entirely correct, when it came to his view on humanity. And he realizes that maybe humanity is not as good as I thought it was. Not in the sense that that they're as good, but more in the sense that he thought humans and apes were different, and they could never be the same. And he realizes towards the end of the film that apes are just like humanity. And then that's basically the breaking point, which eventually leads to war. But I mean, Caesar's character development through that whole entire film is like absolutely fantastic. Because again, it's that character development that you need. He learns from going, being naive and like, a human lover, so to speak, to where he becomes more rational. And he realizes that okay, this is not exactly black and white. This is a lot more gray than I thought. I mean, there's not just good, there's also bad. And even though we are two different species, we are more alike than I think we are. And that is a huge motivator and a huge story point that goes into War of the Planet of the Apes. And then obviously, Koba and Caesar's relationship, plays a huge part of this film, because we see how Koba's mindset, from Rise of the Planet of the Apes, continues on into Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and we see that there are multiple chances, there are multiple points like of the film where like Koba is still loyal to Caesar, and he was like, "Yes, I will follow you, but I don't trust humans." And then you see like chance after chance, like he's trying to show Caesar in his own way that we can't trust these humans, we can't trust these humans, we can't trust these humans, and Caesar kind of keeps brushing it off. And obviously, Koba doesn't necessarily go about it, the correct way, when it comes to dealing with the humans or whatever. But in the end, he was right about the humans, which leads into war. Koba realized that humans are never going to coexist with apes on the planet. That one species is always going to triumph over the other. But the way he went about it was extremely wrong, obviously. Which makes Koba a very interesting character, because in the eyes of humans, he's a villain, right? But in the eyes of apes, maybe more like an anti-hero. You know, he's a great character. I don't condone his actions of like just murdering a bunch of people and also murdering apes and then locking humans in cages. But the point that he was trying to get across, or the message that he was trying to tell, I understand. He was way before his time, and obviously it took Caesar basically until the final movie of the trilogy where he was like, "Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to live side by side." That's why they pretty much relocate to an entire different part of the country um, by the end of War of the Planet of the Apes. So yeah. Like basically the virus took his family and it impacted his son to the point where, because like in the third and final film, I mean, well, before we move into the third and final film, what would you rate Dawn of the Planet of the Apes? I'd probably give it like a solid 9 out of 10 if I had to be honest. I only really knocked it that one point just because the human villain wasn't very villainy, like um I guess he's considered a villain when he wanted to destroy when he wanted to destroy the tower and like murder like thousands of apes like on the tower and possibly himself and um but yeah, I mean what's actually interesting is that before we move on, there's actually a little Easter egg where apparently towards the end of the film, if you stay like or if you watch it the whole entire way through until like it fades to black, you actually hear the sound of rubble, and like you hear like Koba, because basically what they were doing is that they were kind of setting up like a possible return of Koba in the third and final film if they went that storyline. And then they decided to never pursue that storyline, but they wanted to leave it open just in case they wanted to pursue a possible return, because they wanted to maybe do a story where maybe Koba lived and then he teamed up with Woody Harrelson to like take on Caesar and his apes. But I guess they scrapped that idea and then they just kept Koba dead and they just kind of used him as a ghost. Yeah, because I mean his hate wasn't really towards apes or Caesar. I mean, maybe towards the end he didn't really like Caesar, but he definitely would have hated humans more. So I don't see him working together with the human like at all, to be honest. I'll do it. Hold on. It was like the Sierra Nevada Zoo. Like one of the Planet of the Apes comics, I think, goes more into detail about his backstory. Like, in I maybe a comic book store. I don't know where you get. Yeah, you could probably find them on YouTube. You could probably find them on Amazon. You could probably find them anywhere, to be honest. But I think there is a comic that deals with Bad Apes story, or like at least part of his like origin, and it shows like his time like at the Sierra Nevada Zoo and how he's like the only survivor of like all the apes that were there. Um, and yeah, like how his like name is Bad Ape, because like that's what they used to call him. I don't know if he actually had a name before that, or that's just the name he gave him. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was the first time that we're really shown any other apes like outside of like Caesar's group, to show that like this simian flu has like not only wiped out most of humanity, but it's also like making other apes smarter as well. That's really the first bit of knowledge that we get, that like, oh, okay, like there are other parts of the world and like maybe other parts of the country where this flu is also affecting other apes to become smarter just like us. Because we see that this main group of apes that's with Caesar was from like the detention center or like the research facility. So we just assume that like these apes followed him. They had children. They continued the generations, and that's where all these apes come from. So I mean, we know that they freed apes at like the local zoos and whatnot, but who knows how many of those apes followed Caesar? They could have done things on their own. So Bad Ape is one of the first examples of one of these new apes. There's also another new gorilla that we actually meet in the film, an albino gorilla by the name of Winter. He's a new character that doesn't stick around for very long, obviously. Um, but it is interesting to just show how it might be small detail, but it just again it goes to show how this flu has devastated the entire world, and it is making other apes smart. I mean, so it's not just the gas itself, because we see that Caesar like unleashes the gas in the pens in Rise of the Planet of the Apes to make all the other apes smarter, but we see that it's just this airborne illness where like it's just in the air, and like all these like apes have to do is like breathe, and like they could ingest this virus and make themselves smarter. Um, but we see that War of the Planet of the Apes heavily continues the story that was being built in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, where we see that towards the end of the film, there's going to be an epic battle or conflict between humanity and the apes, and we see how the opening of the film shows that perfectly, where it shows like a squad of like Woody Harrelson's men try to infiltrate like Caesar's encampment, or village, and we see that they're actually driven back and defeated, and we see that a handful of them are captured. Along with, surprisingly enough, a gorilla. I don't remember what the gorilla's name is. I mean, they just call them donkeys because they're in service of humans. But fun fact: a lot of apes and primates that were loyal to Koba actually ended up joining Woody Harrelson and the humans as a way to get back at Caesar. So that just goes to show like how alike we are with primates. How they were just so petty and they were so pent up on revenge that they'd rather join the people that they hate the most just to get back at Caesar. Which is really interesting. Um, but yeah, we see that they are successful in like beating back this like little attack, and again we still see Caesar's naivety to an extent. We see that he's not exactly as narrow minded as he was like maybe in like Rise or a little bit in Dawn, but we see that he lets these prisoners go as a sign of good faith. And again, it's always one of those what ifs. Like, what if he killed all of them? Because one of the guys that he lets go ends up, basically landing the fatal blow on Caesar and basically killing them. So it's like if he would have killed that guy, like would he have survived? So it's always one of those great what ifs. So we see that he's merciful at first, and he takes this more peaceful approach. Um, but then we see that comes to bite him right into the butt automatically, and that's when we see Woody Harrelson and his like death unit basically infiltrate Caesar's village and murder some apes and especially kill his wife Cornelia and his older son Blue Eyes. And Blue Eyes, was off screen for a little while because he was traveling with Rocket to this new region of the United States. I think over like the Rocky Mountains, so maybe like a little bit more like southeast, away from like California and like the Pacific Northwest. Um, and that was basically like the apes like promised land. Like that's where like they could finally know peace and like freedom. Um, and and we see that yeah, he comes back from this excursion, and he's reunited with his father and whatever. But then unfortunately, we see that it's really interesting. I wonder if like they wrote that into the story, like if they were gonna actually like kill Blue Eyes like right away, or if like that was maybe like a last minute decision. But we see how like Caesar's consequences like ultimately lead to the death of his wife and child. And what's interesting about this film is that he does like a whole like 360 when it comes to his emotions. Like he goes from like um innocence and like naivety and Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and then he goes from like naive to more like a morally gray stance in like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and then he goes from like a morally gray to like a revenge like Koba like mentality, and then towards the end of the film he finally knows peace. Because we see that he's like plagued by like Koba's ghost the whole entire film because he's letting the loss of his son and his wife basically fuel his need for revenge against Woody Harrelson and the humans. And we see that his choices ultimately lead to the capturing of his entire like tribe. And in that moment, he realizes, well, maybe not even in that moment, because even after all the apes are freed, he still wants to stay behind and kill Woody Harrelson. And when he finally sees Woody Harrelson in that state where the simian flu has taken his ability to speak, that's where he finally is like, you know what? I'm better than you. You know, you're beneath me. Like, what's the point of putting you out of your misery? And that's where he stops his revenge. You know, so Caesar's development throughout this whole entire trilogy comes full circle, and it's an absolutely phenomenal development. Um, you know, we see the end of a lot of character stories. But then we also see how the simian flu is also evolving, and it's actually causing humanity to regress. Very similarly to how they were in like the original Planet of the Apes movies, where they were very primitive and they didn't have the ability to speak and they were very backwards. And we're seeing that in this film, where they meet a little girl, called Nova, and like she does not have the ability to speak. Um, we see that characters like Woody Harrelson and some of his soldiers are infected with this new strain of the flu, and is causing them, the ability not to speak. So we see how this, trilogy. This virus is continuing to make apes smarter, and it's also continuing to de-evolve humans, which obviously leads, hundreds of years into the future with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and we see that further. Um, but this movie just does a great job, like showing the ultimate climax between humanity and apes, and especially the ending kind of gives us the same ending that almost the final installment of the original franchise gives us. Like whether that was Conquest or Battle, the one that came out in like 1973, where you have that Caesar statue and he's crying, and this movie kind of leads to that same scenario. I mean, obviously it has a different ending, but it's like, well, is peace really ever going to be an option? Because the only way that the apes can find peace is if they moved away from the humans. So it's like, how are you supposed to interpret this ending? Are you supposed to interpret this as a victory for the apes, or are you supposed to interpret this as the start of this dystopian like future where they're just kind of living in their own separate spaces and they're not coming into contact with each other? yeah, and yeah, no, I think I would give War Planet like a solid 10 out of 10. I mean, I thought it was a phenomenal film. I didn't really have any problems with it at all. Just showing that the trilogy just kept getting better and better over time, and that's why it's regarded as one of the best trilogies in movie history. Um, yeah, I mean, we explained everything pretty well. I mean, I think each of these movies had their own stories and messages behind them, and they were played brilliantly. And obviously, Caesar was a big part of each of these movies, and his development throughout this franchise is some of the best that we've seen from a fictional character in film, which is definitely something to be of a testament to Andy Serkis, and then just Planet of the Apes as a whole. Going briefly into Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I don't want to talk about too much because obviously, Joey hasn't seen it yet. And I don't want to give any spoilers. But obviously, the story is going to pick up almost like 300 years after War of the Planet of the Apes. So again, we're taking that time jump very similarly to how the astronauts took that time jump in the very first Planet of the Apes movie. Um, we're seeing somewhat of a similar landscape, so to say. Obviously, we see some very interesting characters come into play. Obviously, Caesar's legacy and message is a vital part of the story. We see that he is kind of similar to a possible historical figure or even a religious figure, and how his messages and teachings are being interpreted by apes of that day, and what they're being used for, and also some apes finding out about who Caesar is and learning his message firsthand. Just going to show, again, a lot of messages and symbolism behind, religion or history in modern day society, and how, like, today's generation might not know who certain people are, because they don't really care about history, or just how people take historical figures and messages and twist them for their own agendas and use it for their own purposes. Um, so it is a great film. I think I would give it like a solid 9 out of 10. To be honest, I'm really excited to see what they do in the next installment. Obviously, the way the trailer set it up, they they look to have somebody you think is the main villain of the story, but I think that the whole movie is like one big elaborate ruse, pretty much. And I think that there's a much bigger and more important villain right under our noses that I can't wait to talk about because I definitely have a very strong opinion on that. Um, and I'm just going to leave us with the fact that we are going to see a very interesting conclusion to this new installment of the franchise, because we are going to see that it is going to be either one species or the other. Because even 300 years later, we are still seeing the same habits and the same traits from humans, that we have seen all of our entire lives. And the way that they are setting this up, it makes it seem like that there is going to be one or the other, and one species will fall and one species will rise. Um, so I am definitely excited to talk about it when my brother gets a chance to watch it. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot to talk about, and it just goes to show how this trilogy plays a huge part in the start of this new one. So it is definitely vitally important that if you're going to go and watch Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, that you go back and watch these movies, because the legacy and the message of Caesar plays a very, very important part in those films, and you are probably going to be lost if you do not, see any of these movies. To be honest, so. Well, as I said before, I think I would rate it a solid 9 out of 10. Um, like I said, I thought it was phenomenal. I didn't really have any problems with it. But again, I haven't really thought about it too much, which is why I don't want to give it that 10 out of 10 rating. Um, but like I said, there's a really interesting component of the film that I want to talk about. On who I personally think the villain of the film is. And I'm really excited to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's right up there, and I think it's a great continuation to the trilogy. I think they really can continue the trend, and they do really well with this one. So yeah, cool. Yeah, thank you guys for coming out to another wonderful episode of Two Sons Podcast. It was a lot of fun. Finally being able to talk about Planet of the Apes and the franchise as a whole. We could probably do plenty of different episodes, like on the individual films, and go more into depth about all them. So If you guys would like to see that, please let us know down in the comments. I guess we'll see by how many views this gets, if this is something that you guys enjoy seeing. If not, I mean, I had a blast talking about it, so I wouldn't mind talking about it any further. Definitely be look out for a Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes review, shortly. Hopefully, my brother can get to the theater and see that, so we can talk about that. But yeah, as he mentioned, you can find us on our socials, all under Two Sons Podcast. We are also on TikTok under Two Sons YouTube, and on Spotify and YouTube, all under Two Sons Podcast. With an O, not a U, because we are two brothers. And yeah, we will be posting this episode on Monday. So, by the time we are recording this, we hope you guys have an amazing weekend. Have a very safe and happy Memorial Day weekend for those of you that, celebrate, get together, have any barbecues or whatever. Do some shopping, save up some great deals, enjoy the wonderful and the beautiful weather. And yeah, with that being said, hopefully everybody has a great day, great afternoon, great evening when they listen to this episode. Please be safe. Do not do anything stupid. And because we are talking about Planet of the Apes, whenever come and watch Two Sons Podcast, you listen to Two Sons Podcast, whatever, or, you're just waking up and starting your day every day, just remember, whatever's going on, whatever's happening, no matter what, that it's a wonderful day. It's a wonderful day. Wonderful day.